Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dozer, and if you're new to the show, the mission here is to expose the quacks and gimmicks in the marketing industry while featuring some great marketers and entrepreneurs along the way. On this episode, I'm excited to welcome my guest, Jeff Greenfield. Now, Jeff is the founder and CEO at Provalytics and an expert in all things marketing and attribution. Jeff, thank you so much for hopping on.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Ryan. I'm excited to talk about all the cracks there are in the marketing advertising ecosystem.
It's changing every day, and AI is just making it even harder.
Oh, 1,000%. It's I'm telling you, it's quite a maze for marketers to try to figure out what's real and what's not, and where you should spend dollars and where you shouldn't be spending them.
Absolutely. And we're going to dive into all that here in this episode. But before we do that, just provide a quick intro on kind of your background, your marketing analytics, and just Provalytics, your company.
Yeah, so Provalytics is an AI-driven attribution marketing measurement platform. We're able to give marketers kind of answer that big question about half the money I spend in marketing is wasted. The only problem is I don't know which half. I started the company in 2022. Prior to this, I started one of the first multi-touch attribution companies called C3 Metrics, scaled that company up and exited there in 2019. So I've been in kind of the middle of things since really the growth of digital marketing and seen things kind of all move around. In fact, today is an interesting day, the day that we're actually meeting here, Ryan, because one of the legacy multi-touch attribution companies, Rockerbox, which is used by a lot of e-commerce shops, was just announced today that it was acquired by Double Verify.
Never heard of either of those.
Oh, okay. Well, Double Verify is one of the companies that a lot of the larger marketers use to validate whether ad impressions are real or whether they're bots. Ad fraud is a huge problem. So it just shows how important the concept of outcomes and, still trying to figure out what part of that marketing is wasted is to the marketing advertising folks.
Yeah, so I've been in the PPC world for about 8 years, so I'm familiar with like complexities and those anti-fraud tools. I've never heard of the ones you were describing, but what makes Provalytics, I guess, unique compared to this competition out there?
What makes it unique is, number one, is that we don't need user level data in order to provide our magic, essentially. So we don't need to grab first party data or third party data. We're able to take data directly from the platforms, like from Google PPC, from Facebook, from any CTV or anywhere else that there is, and put it all together using statistical programs and AI to figure out what's working, what's not working in terms of reporting, but more importantly, to tell you where you should spend your next marketing dollar and how to reallocate dollars in order to figure out how to get, more bang for your buck. That's really kind of our biggest thing. What's most important is that the level of granularity that we go down to, most platforms will tell someone like you who's running search, hey, spend 5% more on search. But the problem is that, well, then where do you spend that 5%? You then have to rely upon Google. But what if
I don't trust Google? I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't trust Google, especially if you're spending money in CTV, spending money in Amazon. You need to have an overarching layer that's looking at everything that tells you, the search person, hey, spend 1.5% more in this campaign ad group keyword match type combination, spend this on these campaigns. That's the level of granularity that we go to. We give digital marketers what they need in order to do their job, but we look across all media, both digital and traditional, and even organic media. We even take into account things like organic Facebook posts. We take in public relations, PR data. As much as we can get, we bring it onto our model to provide you, the marketer, with the best outcomes possible with the budget you're dealing with.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? So I refer to attribution as the devil of marketing. You don't know what data to trust. It's coming from all sorts of different platforms. So explain to listeners, I guess, what are some common mistakes marketers make involving data attribution?
Well, one of the biggest problems I'll talk about is how I got into this years ago is that I had a client back in 2007 that was running a lot of display campaigns, and they were all CPA campaigns. And for every conversion that we were having, it was a weight loss client. So for every new person who signed up, we would have 5 vendors claim credit. And we were actually paying out 5 separate commissions because there was nobody really watching things. Obviously, we fixed that very quickly, but and that's the biggest problem that you have is you have this overcounting problem. Now, if everything is going into GA, so let's say you're advertising on Google and Facebook, and the reason people use GA4 is because the numbers always add up. If I had 1,000 sales today, GA4 will say 1,000 sales. Where things get complicated is if I have my website and I'm selling in Amazon and I'm selling on Walmart.com, oh, well, GA is only going to cover my website. But the advertising that I'm buying, the PPC that I'm buying, even though it's delivering people directly to my website, it actually lifts sales in Amazon and in Walmart. And then I'm also buying ads in Amazon and Walmart, and that drives people back to my website. So now when you start adding up from each of these platforms how many sales you had, it'll actually say you probably had 4,000 sales. So now that's the biggest issue is this deduplication. How do you figure that out? And then who gets what sale? And that's where the devil is in all the details. And that's where you need very sophisticated math. And the problem is marketers, we're not good at math. No marketer went to school saying, I'm going to be a creative person, and that's why I'm going to study accounting in college. Nobody ever did that. In fact, us marketers, we actually spend more time in spreadsheets today than our friends who are CPAs. And so instead of us trying to figure this all out, we need to rely upon sophisticated platforms like Provalytics, and there's others out there as well that actually will do the deduplication and will tell us where we should reallocate our dollars to get more sales with the same amount of money. Because once you're able to take your budget and squeeze more sales or squeeze more leads out of it, that's when you go to finance and say, hey, you know how I did that? You know what the trick was behind that? I actually spent money on something and it moved the needle. Let me show you the numbers. But if I had double the budget for that one thing, I could actually increase sales 25%. That's how you get more budget. And that's how you grow as a marketer, is by controlling more of the budget.
Yeah, no, you just laid out a masterpiece there with attribution. So obviously Google transitioned from universal analytics to GA4. I don't know about you. I don't like GA4. All the marketers that I talk to don't like GA4. Why do you think Google did this? And what are the fallacies of GA4?
Well, the biggest fallacies of GA4 is that it's actually analytics and it's independent. Okay, that's just crap. That's just garbage. It's not. In fact, if you somehow or another, if there was a way that Facebook could report on your PPC from Google, would you trust the numbers coming from Facebook?
No.
No. And yet, marketers trust GA4 to report on Facebook. I can't tell you how many clients we've gone into and they're like, yeah, we can't get Facebook to work. We advertise on Facebook and yeah, we look in GA4 and Google brand is what's driving everything for us. It's all these brand and non-brand terms. And it's like, yeah, well, what about the people that see your ad on Facebook? They scroll through it and then they see it on Instagram a couple hours later. They maybe look at it a little bit, but they don't click on it. And then like a couple hours later, they remember, oh yeah, let me check out that brand. And then they Google it and click on it. And you see, this is the problem, is that since the beginning of Google Analytics, like 20 plus years ago, we have a whole generation of marketers who think that the click is what you're buying. And what I mean by that is that, and this is the biggest problem with GA4, is that it teaches folks that the way marketing works is you invest dollars to buy clicks, and clicks lead to sales and leads to revenue. That's not marketing. That's the bottom part of that funnel. Marketing, the way marketing works is you invest dollars to buy eyeballs. And eyeballs are defined as ad impressions. And the reason you buy ad impressions is you want to build awareness. And when awareness is built up enough, people will walk into your store. And since for most of us, our stores are online, that's translated into clicks. So the click is the impact from the marketing. And so whenever you go to download reports from Google or Facebook or Criteo or wherever, there's always, you can choose which rows you want or which columns you want to include. Most people ignore impressions because all you're interested in is cost per sale, cost per click, and that's it. And you ignore what it is that you're actually buying. You're actually buying attention. And the only way to measure that is how many people did you actually reach? How many people did you actually expose to? And that's the issue with GA4. is that the only impressions that are included in GA4 are those of YouTube, Google's owned and operated property. So, and the cool thing is the reason they changed it to universal analytics from Google Analytics is they wanted to get away from the name Google. They wanted you to think it was universal. And now it's an acronym, GA4. Doesn't sound like Google's property. It should really be called Google's Analytics because it is their analytics. That's what it is. It's not anything else except for Google's analytics. And that's the problem. The other big issue with GA4 is that most of marketing today, in terms of where you should be as you start to grow a brand, are these new emerging channels that we could call no-click digital channels. And we're on a podcast right now. This is a great example. Podcast advertising, one of the fastest growing areas. The only thing else that's growing faster than that is connected television, another no-click digital channel. These build awareness. How about digital out of home and billboards? Billboards have been around for years and they work incredibly well, and yet nothing for you to click on. No way to tell. There's no click trail. So where's that tab in Google Analytics? There's no billboard tab. There's no podcast. There's no CTV. There's no Amazon tab. There's no way to port your metrics from Amazon into GA4. And that just gives you an idea of the limitations, because if you are selling any product in the US and it gets to a point where it's at a certain scale, eventually you're going to want to be in these different marketplaces, and yet your analytics can't report on it. Gives you an idea how far behind they are in terms of providing a real solution that encompasses most marketers' needs.
Yeah, and it also makes sense too, right, Jeff? They want to funnel people to Google's products with Google ads and YouTube ads, so that way you can get the data inside Google Analytics. They don't want you going to these other advertising platforms, so it all makes sense there. So the other question I had here, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the cookie collapse. You probably know a lot more about this than I do, but there was this huge thing in the news a while ago. Was it the third-party cookies were going away and it was getting buzz everywhere? First of all, why is this significant and did it happen? And then what's the impact of this on marketing?
Great question. And it's important to bring that up so marketers are aware, because all of advertising technology for years has always functioned based upon this concept of a cookie. And just for folks who are listening who aren't aware, there's primarily two types of cookies. There's a first-party cookie. This is a cookie that's set by the site that you're on. A good example of this is Amazon. You go to Amazon.com, you're automatically logged in. And all a cookie is a little tiny text file that's on your machine that has some sort of encrypted information on it. In the case of Amazon, it may represent something that could tell them you're logged in. There's all sorts of different things on there. Third-party cookies are cookies that are set on a website that is different than what you're actually on. A good example of this is that if you're on the New York Times will set a cookie with New York Times, meaning only the New York Times can read and write those cookies. But like an ad server like DoubleClick will serve like DoubleClick cookies, and they're the only ones that can read that. And the reason they would do that is to enhance the ad experience. So let's say I'm Toyota and I'm advertising a new car, and I know that if you see the ad like 50 times in a day, Ryan, you're going to get pissed off at me and probably get turned off. Maybe I set the frequency that the maximum number of times I want you to see the ad each day is 5. So you go to the New York Times in the morning and it sets a cookie on your machine that has in it Toyota 1. And then you go to the Wall Street Journal, you see the same ad. It now increments that from 1 to 2. And once it reaches 5, it's not going to show you any more ads for the rest of the day. Because essentially what happens is when you load a page on any website, there's like a real-time auction that's happening in the background. And they use this cookie technology to figure things out. The other thing cookies are used for is targeting, to try to figure out what segments you're in. But from my perspective, it was used for measurement, because in addition to that DoubleClick cookie, we would have our own cookie there so that, and it was all anonymous, but that eventually when you made a purchase or filled out a lead form on a client of ours, we could connect all the dots from the first time you were exposed to an ad all the way through, and then line it all up in a date and time-stamped order and see which areas had an actual impact on you, where you moved and you said, oh my God, I'm even more interested in this. And On an individual basis, it doesn't mean much, but when you start to aggregate all that data, that's where machine learning comes in and can really uncover things. And back before 2014, we would have tags on every website, including Facebook and even Amazon. But then it was it was like late 2014. All of a sudden, Facebook said, we're not going to allow this anymore. And they put up their walls, and that's where the term the walled garden came up. So now, and so did Amazon, so did YouTube. And so now what happens is, and this was kind of the first aspect of that cookie collapse, which was the inability to collect data from these different sites where people were spending a lot of time. Then we had all these privacy changes in the EU with the GDPR. We had the CCPA in California. Yep. And then Apple came along with their app transparency update, where it asked all of us, hey, do you want this app to track you? And we all were like, I'm not going to opt in on that. Absolutely not. And what that did is that put a huge black hole for a lot of the apps like Meta and others to figure out what you were doing elsewhere. So they were unable to really see what was going on. And so now that meant like all of mobile Safari, the whole app universe, all these other app places were walled gardens. You couldn't see through them. And then Chrome came along and said, hey, we're getting ready to rid of the third-party cookie. And they kept saying it was going to happen. And then they said no. And then it's going to happen next year. And then they said no. And then what's going to happen? And then they said, no, it's not going to happen. But we're now hearing that they're going to kind of do the same thing with an update that Apple did, which is they're going to ask you, do you want to opt into this? And then it's up to the user to decide. Now, the impact that has happened on the industry as a whole is that over these number of years that these changes have taken place, and it's really over the last 8 to 10 years, what's happened is that the industry has grown up and realized that you can't really create all these user segments for targeting. And that's why for folks who are listening, have been buying on Facebook and in Meta for years, you can't go as deep in terms of your targeting as you used to. It used to be, if you were in the auto business, you could target Ford F-150 leaseholders whose lease was going to expire in 6 months. That's pretty heavy duty. That's gone. In fact, you notice every month you log in, it says, hey, when this campaign runs out of money, you can't buy these segments anymore. They're not available. So the industry has started responding to that. And all of the ad serving mechanisms, they've shifted over to kind of cookie list type stuff. And the methodology that I used at my former company was all about trying to collect all of that data, which is no longer available. So we're really living in a world that's kind of back to the future, meaning that we're at the same level we were before digital. So digital is there. We can buy and really detailed segments, but we're not going to be able to get that user level data that we had for the last 15 years unless that person is a customer of ours and unless they opt in and we're able to figure that out in our own CRM, which is what retailers have had for years who did direct mail. So we're really back to how things were in like 2000. That's really the world we're living in today. And that's why from a measurement perspective, most of us are using statistical modeling techniques that the reality is have been around since the 1950s, but they've been elevated through the use of AI and the faster computers. But the techniques are tried and true and work amazingly well.
Obviously, there's still a lot up in the air, right, with the Google lawsuit, and they're going to have to sell Chrome potentially. That factors into a lot of this equation, of course. I'm also been in the affiliate marketing world for 5 or 6 years now. So obviously, cookies play a big role in attribution from affiliate marketing. But I want to talk about AI a little bit now, Jeff. And how do you think AI overall is just going to impact attribution in online marketing? What are the biggest impacts you think AI is having or is going to have?
Well, one of the biggest impacts that it's having right now is actually in the creative space. We all think about, from a marketing standpoint of view, that the folks that really are the largest marketers when we think about the digital ecosystem and all our advertising are folks like General Motors, the automobile companies, insurance companies like Progressive, and the pharmaceutical companies. But the reality is, when we think about the largest advertising segment in the US And what makes up 95% of the advertising revenue on Meta are small businesses. So when you think about your local florist, your dentist, those types of folks, Meta is where they spend most of their dollars. And where AI has come in is the idea that I can go in, put in a website, or even if I don't have a website, I can just put in a logo or my company name, and it will automatically, like magic, make me an ad. Because you see, that's always been the barrier, is the ability to make someone an ad. And so AI is now being used to automate the process of initially creating ads. And then when you think about the idea how ads are delivered not in mass to everybody all at once, there's now this degree that we're going to be able to get to where the version of the ad that you see, Ryan, is going to be completely different than the version I see. It may have a different background color. There may be a different actor or actress in there. And now with the ability of how we're able to create video using AI so quickly, one of the big opening availability for someone like a Meta is to take someone like me to say, hey, I'm buying this segment of people based upon your area, your segmentation on both Instagram and Facebook. I'd like to target them on connected television, maybe on Amazon Prime. Facebook has that capability to do that. In fact, right now, LinkedIn, some of our clients are using their LinkedIn data of who they want to target, and they're buying connected television based upon LinkedIn segments. So it's those data owners. But again, the small business person like the florist, I don't have a TV ad, like a 30-second ad. I guess I could go to Fiverr to do that. But if you own your own business, who's got the time to do that? Well, guess what? That's going to be included as part of it. So that's one aspect of it. From the measurement side of things, we use AI in our process. We don't use it like a chat GPT where it answers questions, and we don't send data out. We trained an AI to oversee the math aspect. There's these stop parts of our process where things have to get checked to see that the formulas are moving along, and then it has to go through a series of steps. And we have AI that does that. But where things get very exciting is that right now our output goes to a series of media buyers and experts who look it over, and then they then look at it and they kind of scratch their heads and they say, okay, I'm going to do this. I may not do this. This doesn't make sense for me. Because human beings, they still want to turn the dials on the machines. But the capabilities for AI is that the AI outputs the details, and then the AI pushes the changes directly to Meta, directly to Google, directly to Amazon. So there's no human beings involved at all. That's kind of the promise of this, because then the process will be much speedier. But we're not quite there yet, because human beings are still involved in the process. We still want humans involved in the creative process. But I think over the next decade, we're going to see all of that start to change drastically. That's where AI is really going to have a big impact.
Yeah, very well said. I completely agree. So this is my favorite segment of the show where we talk about marketing quacks. This is the Marketing Quacks podcast after all, Jeff. So in your opinion, define a marketing quack in your world. What are some tricks and gimmicks that you see people do that just kind of make your blood boil and you don't like?
Well, what I don't like is when people think that there's some sort of secret to this, that especially when it comes to measurement,
Like the
that,
silver bullet or something like that.
yeah, that this, whenever you do this in combination with this, you're going to get this return on investment. And the reality is that that's not the case. And where people think, oh, for this segment, like, okay, I'm in the clothing world, or I'm in health and beauty, then this combination of things is the right combination. And the reality is that the market is so spread out for most products. People's attention is so like split up. People, you have to capture attention so quickly these days. So that's the first thing, is thinking that there's some special formula to this. The second biggest thing is that I do not see enough time nor investment spent with the creative or the messaging. 70% of the effectiveness of all ads is the message that you're putting out there. And back in the early days of digital, the reason we used ad servers is because, let's say I was buying across 25 different sites, they would have the ad code. And literally on my side, I can upload a new creative to 3 of them and immediately start getting A/B testing to see what was working and what wasn't working. And we used to change creative every month. We would rotate in 5 or 6 new creatives. We wouldn't have to change out the tags or anything. I see marketers using the same creative over and over again. You should be every month introducing variations of creatives that are working. And when I say variations, what I mean is if the creative with the blue background is working the best, there's a million shades of blue, some of which are not even, you can't even perceive with the human eye, but there's a different emotional feeling to it. And it's important to remember that marketing and advertising is all about emotion. You're trying to capture attention. You're trying to put a message in someone's head, not to buy now, not to act now, but start thinking about it. Become aware of my brain. So you're trying to get that attention. So there's lots of things you can do. And especially with AI today, you could take an ad where you have an actor saying something and just change the voice completely. Have a different tone to the voice. Have everything stay the same except for the tone of the voice. See what kind of difference there is. There's so many variations, but you should be testing multiple variations every month. And you're going to find that certain variations are going to work well with certain segments of customers you're going after. So there's lots of stuff to play with there. And I just don't see folks doing it because it's like, do I want to go through that? Yeah, it's and I also, what's happened is that marketing has become so complicated. It's about the numbers, and there's so much work putting together the data for the reports. And I find that marketers find today that their job is to just download data and put it in spreadsheets and build out reports. And part of our job here at Provalytics is to do the math for you so you can get back to the creative aspect, which is to try to come up with new variations and think outside the box, because that's what really works.
Yeah, and you could use 11 Labs for what you were saying earlier with the different voices and whatnot. I play around with HeyGen, 11 Labs. I'm in all sorts of AI tools, Jeff. But anyways, any final notes that you have here on just this entire episode about data attribution, marketing, et cetera? Any final notes you want to leave for listeners here?
What I would leave for them is that, the world's changed a lot, and guess what? It's going to change again. If you're using something right now in marketing, and you've been doing it for 6 months and it's been killing it, you are on borrowed time, because that's how quickly the world works. Don't forget that the folks who you're buying through Meta, Google, Amazon, these are all publicly traded companies, and they live based upon the quarter and quarterly results.
That's why you got to start collecting emails.
That's right. And they make changes based upon not your needs, but their needs. So if things are working and you're at 6 months, you better get ready. Don't be caught by surprise. I think that's my biggest note. The other thing is that because of all the changes in measurement, we put together a free attribution certification course. It's available on our website at provalytics.com. It's under the resources section. It's about an hour and a half for you to take it. There's a quiz afterwards. You pass the quiz, you get a great certificate for you to put on LinkedIn. But it's kind of the past, the present, and what we see is the future of attribution. And what we find is the best way for you to know what's coming next is to see what happened before. So that's kind of my takeaway for today.
Yeah, I like that. So where can people find you online to learn more, Jeff?
You can go to provalytics.com or find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk to marketers or other entrepreneurs anytime.
Perfect. I'll leave all that in the notes below, and appreciate you hopping on, Jeff. And thanks to everyone to listening to this episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. Be sure to tune in again next time.